Welcome to Momtroversial, the podcast that dives headfirst into the beautiful chaos of motherhood and dishes on the stuff we wish we'd known and nobody tells you. I'm Alyssa, crunchy mom all about organic living. I'm organized, opinionated, and your designated wingwoman in any parenting bar fight. Tori and Leah are preparing for international moves, Leah with a newborn, so they're taking a well-deserved break right now. However, I get to chat with Mama Audra. Mama Audra is Audra Phelps. She's a certified parenting and identity coach who helps women rebuild their lives after leaving the Latter-day Saints Church, which you may know as the Mormon Church, although I understand that they prefer Latter-day Saints
Yes.
as the official term. So you spent years as an international school director serving in Asia, and then you kind of transitioned full-time into coaching. Do you want to give us just a little background on yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, born and raised Mormon or LDS, and just a little bit of my professional background. I was a teacher, a high school biology teacher. I started out in public schools in the U.S., and then my husband is an elementary school teacher. And we discovered the world of international teaching, these American private schools overseas. And we had 3 kids and we were like, this is great. Let's do it. Because we could explore the world on someone else's dime, because there's no way we could afford it as public school teachers.
Amen.
So we went overseas. It's been 13 years now. We've lived in 4 different countries. We raised our kids mostly overseas. And then as I was doing during this time overseas, I left the church, which is a whole big part of the story, but we'll stick to the professional side for now. I left the church and was really doing a deep dive into, okay, then who am I now?
Mm-hmm.
And I left 11 years ago. And through that process, I had to ask some really big questions, and one of them was, do I really choose the career that I'm in? Because I'm in a career that's based on, when I was young Mormon Audra, choosing to be a teacher because it was the most benign job a Mormon mom could have, right? Because it kept me in the same schedule as my kids and they didn't have to go to daycare. Anyway, so I did a really deep dive and I thought, okay, what are the things I love about my job? And I really loved working with students when they would come into my classroom and kind of download their problems and being their like pseudo counselor. And then when I moved into school administration, so now I'm the director of an international school. And when I moved into administration, I had a lot of parents coming through my office asking for parenting advice and how to deal with different situations. And I thought, those are the parts of my job I really like that I would like to continue to keep doing. And I actually had my own coach who was kind of helping me work through some of these big life decisions. And I said, I think I want to be like a parenting coach or, something like that. And she said, well, what demographic do you want to work with? And I said, I don't really know. And she knew my history and she said, have you ever thought of working with other ex-Mormon moms? And like as soon as she said that, I just burst into tears. Like, that is it. That's what I want to do, because I know how difficult it is to leave, how you have to rebuild your life. And then, the church told you how to be a mom. They told you exactly how to raise your kids. And now you don't have that roadmap anymore. And not only have I gone through it myself, but then when I decided to make this career change about 2 years ago, then I did an NLP practitioner certification course so that I could have some of the, credentials to be a coach and know some of the tools and strategies that my coach was using on me that I could now use to help other women. So I've been doing that part-time now while also running an international school overseas. And I'm like, okay, it's time to just do this full time because I love it so much. So I'm moving back to the US and I'll be doing the coaching full time.
That's so awesome. So I'm actually already going to go off script. And I'm curious, like, what what is the demand for this? Like, obviously you're going full time, so there is a demand.
Yeah.
But you don't really hear about people moving in and out of religions and stuff. So like what is that? Is there this huge demand? Is it, would you compare it maybe to just any other religion? What do you think about that?
There's a massive demand.
Interesting.
There are people leaving the church in droves right now. And when you look at what's happening in the church, they're trying to like throw bones so that people will stay. But there's a lot of people having their own awakening and starting to open their eyes to to basically living a life that was really prescribed and not having any autonomy.
Hmm.
And then being really, a lot of people are very disgruntled with like the bigger issues in the church, some of the church history, some of the doctrine, some of the beliefs. There's a lot of people leaving, and um a lot of resources kind of help you leave, but I help you build what comes next so you don't stay
Yeah.
stuck in that anger and that frustration, and you can start to feel regulated when you think about
Hmm.
the church, or dealing with the grief of, that's a big one, is the grief of loss, because a lot of people lose family
Hmm.
members or friends when they leave, and like how to move through that. And then as you're learning more about yourself and tuning into who you are and making choices that are aligned, then you can see other people who are still in the church as they talk about the church, and you can have that healthy boundary and healthy respect for their autonomy to choose that and their autonomy to have those beliefs, and then you are allowed to have your own beliefs as well. So there's a really big need. Yeah.
I love that, especially what you said about just having the respectful boundaries, but still being able to interact with people, because I think our world is losing that a little bit. If you don't agree with me, then you hate me. And that's just not the
Yeah.
case.
No,
Um,
and that, you don't want to live in that space.
mhm,
All of that negative energy, that's going to affect your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health. You don't want to stay in that. And so a lot of people, when they leave, they're stuck in the anger and the hurt and the frustration, and they don't quite know how to move through it, feel it, learn from it. And now what's next for me? And especially as a mom, when you're raising kids and you're like, I thought I had to have all the answers, and I was supposed to be, the one who knows everything for my kids and is so certainty and gives them their moral compass, and so we really kind of dive into what your definition of a good mom is, where did that come from?
mhm,
There's a lot to unravel, because the LDS church is more than just a belief in God. It's more than just a religious belief. It is an entire life. You're told who you are, what your purpose on this planet is, exactly what to do, what to eat, what to drink, what to do on a Monday night and a Sunday and a Wednesday. And, and you have what's called a calling. So you're constantly like basically free labor for the church, doing things for the church. It's your entire life. It's your
yeah.
entire life. And one of the big things that women struggle with when they leave, me included for many years, and then women that I start working with, is that they've been taught to distrust themselves for their whole lives. So, for
Mhm.
example, like I was always the kid in Sunday school that was like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that, you know? And then,
Yes.
and for as a small child, I was told, your doubt is sinful and you just don't understand how the Lord works. The Lord works in mysterious ways. And so you just need to have more faith. And I was told that all the way through my childhood years and my adult years. And so, what did that teach me from a very young age? It taught me to distrust myself. It taught me that um, that my thoughts were actually coming from Satan, is how I was taught,
And that's
and that
terrifying.
it's terrifying. And so anytime you had a thought that was slightly, offbeat from what the church was teaching you, it was like, I'm such a bad person. Satan's deceiving me. I let him in. And so you learned to bury yourself. You bury your own beliefs, you bury your intuition. And so when you make the really brave choice to leave, one of the things you have to rebuild is learning to listen to yourself again and trust yourself. All the answers are really within you. You just have to learn how to trust yourself. And that also goes into parenting decisions. You don't have to consult 100 self-help parenting books, and you don't have to talk to
Yeah.
10 friends. Like, really, the answer's within you. You just have to learn to trust yourself.
Yeah. So on that note, one of the things that you talk about is like the fear of like, am I ruining my kids' lives by leaving the
Yeah.
church, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So how do you walk a mom through this kind of guilt while also like you were saying, teaching her to trust her sense of self and to even just have a sense of self in the first place now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a quick fix, that's for sure. That's something you often deal with in the moment too. But that feeling of guilt of I'm ruining my kids' lives, that that doesn't come from, I mean, you've made the decision to leave, and it doesn't come from I'm ruining my kids' lives because I'm not raising them in the church anymore. It comes more from I started raising them in the church, and I gave them all of this certainty, and I, told them what to believe and who to be. And now I'm changing that. Like, how is that going to mess with their psyche, with their sense of self, right? So, um there's a lot of different things that we can do to kind of help work through that guilt and work through those emotions. The first is we kind of start poking holes in some beliefs that you might have. So, if you feel that I'm ruining my kid's life, right? Let's just use that as an example. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom, I'm ruining my kid's life. So we stop for a minute and we kind of try to dive into, okay, that how does that feel in your body? It feels bad, like you want to push it out, right? It feels constrictive, like you can't really breathe. It doesn't feel good. So whenever you feel like that, like a thought comes up, like I'm ruining my kid's life, and you feel really constrictive, that's a sign that there's some kind of a belief there in your subconscious that's probably a conditioned belief that is giving you this emotion, but it's not aligned with you. It's not really aligned with who you are. So we start to sort of poke holes in it. So one of the things we do is we'll okay, we identify the belief. I'm ruining my kid's life. I must be a horrible mom because I'm ruining my kid's life. Okay. Um, where did that belief come from? That your choice to leave is going to ruin your kid's life and it makes you a bad mom. Where did that belief come from? So we do a lot of journaling here because it takes some time to kind of flesh it out, right?
Yeah.
And then, okay, who gave you that belief? And usually, if it's a belief that feels constrictive in your body, it didn't come from you. It came from some kind of an external authority, probably from the time you were a small child. So you didn't even know that it was implanted there, right? And then it's like, let's poke holes in it so that it's not an absolute truth. So is that always true? Is it always true that you're a bad mom? Is it always true that changing your mind and making a different decision is ruining your kid's life? Is there
Would
ever a
you
time
tell
that
your kids that?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Would you tell and that's a big one too, is like, give yourself grace, because women will give other people grace. They'll give their kids grace,
All
but they
day.
won't give them. Yeah, but they
Yep.
won't give themselves grace.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then is there ever a time that that's not true? Is there ever a time where, you've changed your mind on something and your kids were fine and it was actually better for them and they were happy about it? And so as you kind of go through this process, you start to actually rewire the subconscious where that's not the automatic habit, that's not the automatic pattern for their brain to go to. And then we find, okay, what feels better? What's a better feeling belief? And in that case, it might be this is showing my kids that they can change their mind. This is giving my kids freedom. This is showing my kids that they can make decisions that are based on them and that they don't have to look to an outside source, whether it be religion or society or whatever.
We can
And then
do hard
that belief,
things.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then that belief, it feels expansive, it feels light, it feels airy. So that's kind of some of the work that we do, that I do with women when they're really struggling with mom guilt. And it usually comes back to some kind of a belief that makes them a good or a bad mom. And that definition of a good or a bad mom didn't come from them. So we work through these emotions and these thought patterns, and we start to poke holes in those beliefs and come up with something that.
Okay. That's cool. What about from like the control perspective of you're teaching these moms that they have this autonomy and they have the ability to make good decisions on their own, but then they're also having to turn that into parenting, right? So
Mhm.
how do you help them shift their parenting style away from maybe super strict control to teaching their kids that they are also able to make these decisions and have this autonomy and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, when you leave a high demand religion like the Mormon church, um, you often, you're constantly looking for that outside authority, for an outside choice. And I usually tell women in these kind of situations, when you were a kid, how did it feel when you were told what to believe and what to do, and you had this prescribed life and it didn't feel good to you and you didn't like it, but you did it anyway and you felt really controlled? Do you want your kids to feel that way? And so, okay, if you don't want your kids to feel the way that you felt, where you didn't have a choice, then let's think of a better way to do that. And this isn't about letting your kids run wild and do whatever they want. This is just about how you can approach it so your kids feel better. There's a better feeling emotion in the conflict, because usually it's some kind of a conflict where you want them to do something and they want to do something else, right? So let's think of a better way to do that. There's a few ways. One, I always talk about reflective listening. Like, it's so important when you're talking to your kids about any kind of situation, something they want to do and you're not quite sure about it yet, is listen, but like, stop with the advice. Just shut your mouth for a minute, right? And just listen. And reflective listening means you're really listening to understand. And then when they finish, you paraphrase it and you say it back to them in your own words. Okay, so what you're telling me is XYZ.
Hmm.
And then they'll confirm, or maybe you got it wrong, right? Maybe you're misunderstanding what they're trying to say. And they'll say yes, or they'll say no, it's like this. And so you can go back and forth so that you really have a clear understanding, and ask clarifying questions, not clarifying questions that are leading or manipulative, but
Yeah.
clarifying questions that are really about seeking to understand. Then once and also, you can share, why you feel the way you feel, so it can be a discourse, it can be back and forth, but really first
Hmm.
dedicate time to understanding how your kids feel, because they want to know that they're being heard.
Hmm.
And then, I'll give the example of, when my kids were teenagers. One of the conflicts that came up for us was, we were living in Eastern Europe, where the drinking age was 16.
Mm.
And, a lot of their friends they would go out for a drink. But I grew up in Mormon culture where alcohol was completely forbidden. It was really sinful. If you had one sip of
Okay.
alcohol, it was like, you are just going to be damn straight to hell and you might as well join an AA meeting. I mean, it was really extreme. And so I but then I found myself hypocritical, because I'd been out of the church for a few years and I was drinking alcohol and kind of, experimenting with, like, do I like it? Do I not like it? Kind of a thing. But then when my daughter came to me and she's like, I want to go out with friends and, they're going to have a drink, my immediate reaction was that conditioned belief of, she's going to get drunk and she's going to get pregnant and she's going to, drop out of school. Like, you go to the worst case
Yeah.
scenario, right? And I'm like, okay. And I felt constrictive in my body as soon as I felt that. So I was like, okay, there's a belief that I have there that's not really aligning with me, but it's the well-worn pattern. It's the habit, right? And so I sat down with her and we did with my husband, we had kind of like a family powwow about it, did some reflective listening. One of the things I learned, which I had also seen from observation, is that when in Eastern Europe, it's like kids will go out and have a drink and then come home. Like, it's not like they're out partying every time they go out and have a drink, right? It's very much like in moderation, and they can handle it socially a lot more than Americans can. I think because in America, it's forbidden until you're 21. But in
The
Eastern Europe,
stigma.
yeah, exactly. So in Europe, since it's acceptable, they don't feel like so rebellious, and they have to just get as much as they can at one sitting. Anyway, so I sat down with her and, we really worked through it together, and I listened to her perspective, and then I was able to kind of shift my own belief on that. And like, okay, I was feeling constrictive about my immediate no, it'll make you drop out of school, and my immediate dramatic response. I was able to kind of poke holes in it. Is that always true? Is there ever a time that's not true? What's a better feeling emotion? Well, a better feeling behavior would be for me to talk to my daughter and set up some ground rules that we're comfortable with, that allows her to have some life experience and go out with friends and have a good time, but doesn't put her in an unsafe situation. And so we talked through it together, and I was able to kind of work through that belief in the background, and then came up with some family guidelines that we came up with together that wasn't given to us from a book or from a church or from some kind of belief that alcohol is a sin. And we came up with a plan together on, these are the guidelines. If you're going to go out with friends, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. This is when you call us, this is when you pick us up, or this is when we pick you up, those kinds of things.
Based in
And
safety
based in
more than
safety, not fear,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And based on like what felt good and like beliefs that we had. I didn't believe that alcohol was a sin anymore, yet that pattern was for me to automatically jump to that belief. And so I had to kind of poke through that belief and come up with a new one, that alcohol is okay in moderation. It can be something that she can experiment with, and it doesn't make her a bad person. And so, I mean, that's just kind of an example of some of the ways that I have worked through that. And then, how I help other women work through that too, when they have those parenting struggles and they don't know what to do. And that conditioned belief is immediately right there, and it doesn't feel good. Let's work through and see what does feel good, so you can do it differently than how you were raised, which is difficult to do, because if you were
It is.
raised in one way, that's what was modeled to you. You don't have another model of how to do it, even though you want to do it differently.
Yeah, that we just did a whole series on parenting styles, and we talked a lot about how, you know, it takes a lot of like self-awareness and just like thought and intention to change your parenting style away from how you were parented, because
Yes.
it's just what you know.
Yeah.
Um, Necessary a lot of the times, but definitely
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, I had good parents. I was raised in a good home, but it's not the way that I wanted to raise my kids. It was not the way. And I mean, there were good things that my parents did that I have integrated into my parenting style, but there was also a lot that I knew I wanted to change.
Hmm.
And that's daunting, because it's a little bit of trial and error. And like that,
Oh yeah.
that's
Tons.
a message that I think a lot of moms need to know, is like, sometimes there's this perfectionism attitude. Like, you can make a mistake as a mom. That's totally okay. You own it, you talk to your kids and you say, I'm figuring this out too. Let's work through this together. And like we said before, give yourself grace, because as you know better, you do better. And like the mom I was when I had my first child, and then the mom I was 10 years later, was two different moms. But when I first became a mom, I was doing the best I could with what I knew. And I was
Hmm.
following, the model of how I was raised and how the church told me to be raised. And I was doing the best I could. And then the mom I am now is totally different. And so sometimes you feel that regret, like, oh my gosh, I should have done it so much differently. And I really regret doing that. And, that really affected my kid in some way. And again, it's about giving yourself grace.
Yeah.
You would give grace to your friend who came to you with that feeling, and you would say, you know what? You did the best you could with what you knew. And look at your kid. She's fine. She's great. And,
Yeah.
she might need some therapy, but that's okay. Don't we all?
Who doesn't? That. Well, something I'd really like to get into, because so for us, our beliefs are based in a non-denominational Christianity. And so a lot of our listeners kind of share those beliefs. So I kind of wanted to talk about the differences because, again, religion is so taboo. Nobody talks about it, but I hate that. I hate every, finances. Don't talk about money. Don't talk about religion. No, talk about it. Talk about it. Learn about it.
Yeah.
Because how else are we supposed to really grow?
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we had on Momtroversial. So our faith is anchored in a God who's infinite, the uncreated creator of everything. He is eternal. He was never created.
Oh,
But
I haven't heard that before.
yeah. So God, in Genesis, it says that He created the world, but in nowhere does it say that God was ever created. I believe in First John, it says that, let me just look it up so I get it right. But in First John, it says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So in the beginning, God already existed, essentially. And that's in First John. So, but my understanding of the LDS theology is that it teaches that God the Father had a physical body of flesh and was mortal who progressed to godhood. And so if that's the case, like everything just completely kind of falls apart when you leave the church. And so I'm curious what a lot of moms turn to. How do you help them as they're turning to whatever they're turning to? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you've done your research on the Mormon faith, yes. Yeah, they they believe that God still has a body of flesh and bone,
Okay.
and they believe that God's son is Jesus Christ, so that they're not one being. There's actually three separate beings. So God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are actually three separate individuals.
Okay.
Um, and yes, they believe that actually the end goal for us on humans on this planet is that eventually, when you die, if you're good and you check all the boxes, you do all the things, you go to the temple, all those things, you're a good, upstanding member of the Mormon church. When you die, and you go to the celestial kingdom, which is like the highest level of heaven, then you can actually become a god yourself and rule your own worlds. And so it's this really, I never really dove that deeply into that part of the theology because I think that was one of the things I was like, what? This doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. But yeah, so you've done your homework for sure. So that's a really big difference. And so, yes, when you leave the church, everything falls apart. And it's like, hellfire and damnation basically is how you feel, right? Like I'm now just going to be, Satan's tool for evil.
Which is, again, terrifying. Not the goal.
Terrifying.
Not the goal for anyone, even someone who wants to leave.
Exactly. And so one of the big beliefs that I tackle with women is this idea that the world is dichotomous. So basically, there's only right or wrong. There's only good or bad. There's only heaven or hell, that there's no in between. And so for me, actually, that is one of the things that I think kept me in the church for so long. I left when I was 35 But I had doubted and struggled for about 10 years. And I probably would have left earlier, except for that fear of I'm damning myself to hell if I leave. I'm damning my children to hell if I leave, because I would be breaking those family covenants that I made in the temple that kept my family sealed. This is all Mormon jargon, so if it doesn't make sense, I can explain some of that. But
Yeah.
that
So you
go
say
ahead.
the family covenants. I did
Yes.
read a little bit about that, but it's essentially like it's what creates your family unit that can eventually get you to godhood. And if you break that, then you've lost that. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So that all starts in the temple, in the Mormon temple. So the Mormon temple is not the church you go to on Sunday, right? It's a special building
Okay.
where it's a special building where only elite members can really go. I say elite, they would never use that term, but that's how I see it now. And so
Yeah.
you have to basically go to your bishop and have this what's called a worthiness interview that gives you a little card that's your temple recommend that allows you to go to the temple. And so you go to the temple for the first time for usually two reasons: because you're about to get married or because you're going to go serve a mission. And then you go for yourself and you get what's called the temple endowment, this is where you get the special Mormon underwear called garments, and you make these covenants to God in the temple. And then when you get married, that's really considered like the highest ordinance or covenant that you can make here on earth with God. So when you get married in the temple, they call it a sealing. You're sealed to your spouse for time and all eternity. And then that sealing also encompasses the children that you're going to have. But
Okay.
that promise of eternal life is only valid as long as you remain righteous, as long as you keep your covenants, as long as you follow all of the, tenets of the and beliefs of the church, then
Hmm.
that you are promised eternal life for you and your children in the afterlife. So that's a little bit of a
Okay.
deep
So
dive
it's a
into
big deal though.
it's a
It's a
really big
huge
deal.
deal.
It's
Yeah.
a
Like
really big deal. Yes.
you're not just your decisions are not just affecting you according to the
No,
faith. It's like you said, damning your children to hell too, and that kind of
damning
thing.
your children. So
So
like a
that's a big deal.
lot of women I work with, including myself, when you leave, one of the first comments you're going to get is, but you need to think about your kids' salvation, because if you leave, then you're ripping that temple promise, away
Which
from
is
your
clever.
children.
That's tricky. That's
Yeah.
very manipulative in my opinion.
It's very
Yeah.
manipulative. And so again, you feel like your decisions are not your own, and every decision you make is affecting someone else. It doesn't matter about you. It matters about you taking care of everybody else. So it's really heavy. So a lot of people, that keeps them in is that fear of I'm now going to eternally damn my children, and I'm going to also be eternally damned. And so it takes a long time to, you know leaving the church for me was not, you can't go from A to Z. You have to have all of the letters of the alphabet in between before you can get to the I'm leaving.
That big
It's a
decision.
very Yeah, it's such a big decision, and a lot of those steps are unraveling that fear of damnation, that fear of what this means for my family. And so I had a lot of experiences that slowly took me away from the church. And then when there was one thing that happened that for me was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And um when I did make the decision to leave, because I had already been through this process, I was able to take off my Mormon garments, which was huge because that was so symbolic. And then
Okay.
I was able to look at myself in the mirror and say, I am not Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't like if this means I'm going to hell, I'm okay with it. That wasn't the belief that I had at that moment. The belief I had in that moment was, I don't even believe the doctrine of the church anymore. So I know that this is not going to send me to hell.
Okay, but no, that's really interesting. I did want to backtrack and say I said it was in First John, but it's actually in John, which is one of the Gospels in the Christian Bible, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." And what you said about the God being three separate people, we believe that God is three people in one, which is a total faith thing because he's 100% himself in each person, but he's not 300%, and that's confusing.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
but
I
yeah,
could see that.
that is that gosh, that has got to be so hard. It's so tied up in your identity, and as moms, like we our kids are just everything. And so to have all that hinge on your kids, like if I'm wrong, this is huge. That is
Yeah.
so hard. And
Yeah, and so you're really kind of unraveling like I'm leaving, but I think you in order to like 100% make that decision, I'm leaving and not have that fear of damnation. It's I'm leaving because I don't even believe anymore that my choice to leave is going to send me straight to hell. You
it
really
has to
have to
be.
that's one of the things women really well, anyone who leaves a high demand religion, but especially the women I work with and including myself, when you leave, it's like, okay, I don't believe the Mormon doctrine, but now there's a whole other world of Christianity. So do I still believe in Christ? And that's a very personal journey and that's different for everyone.
Definitely.
Some people have this full separation of like, no, I'm just done with religion in general. And they go mostly agnostic, not really
Mhm.
atheist, but more agnostic. Like, I'm okay not knowing. I don't need to know. But
Mhm.
then, some women, they start to dive more into the Bible. So they let go of
Mhm.
that, of the Book of Mormon, right? And they start to
Mhm.
dive more into the Bible and they start to look at other religions and what are some other beliefs centered around Christ, because that Christ is a big part in the Mormon faith. And so they often want to keep that and integrate that into their life moving
Mhm.
forward. And diving into the Bible, what does the Bible really teach if I'm looking at it not from how the Mormon church interpreted it for me, but
Mhm.
what's my interpretation of these stories of Christ and the parables that he told and how that would translate into my life. So there's and then they're learning to also, pay attention to themselves again and trust their own
Mhm.
feelings and follow that. So, different women will take different paths according to what feels good to them. And
Mhm.
it's also as they're starting to break down that belief of there's only good or bad, there's only right or wrong. I think it's really powerful for them to see that they can make a different choice from their parents, which they've already done by leaving the church, which also means that we allow, other people to believe other things. And so what one woman chooses to believe after she leaves can be different from what another woman believes. And like,
Mhm.
that's okay. That's totally okay.
Yeah, it's got to be such a journey because, you know, and even like just obviously I know the most about what I believe, but just from like listening to you, you go from the LDS belief of, there is some grace, but you have to like earn it kind of thing versus we believe that grace is it's a free gift from God that Christ died for us. He rose from the grave and he took all of that blame on himself for us and all we have to do is accept the gift, which is just really different to be I guess so accepted for who you are and yes, we
Mhm.
want to live in a way that Jesus has called us to live, But no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, Jesus loves us. No matter what decisions we have made, what decisions we aren't making, and what decisions we will make. And so that must be like for those women that kind of start to kind of explore that, that just must be the biggest like mind bending thing because it's so opposite. Even though a lot of people would say that we have like sister religions, if you will, but it really is opposite.
Yeah, I could see that. In the Mormon faith, things are very conditional. And I didn't recognize it as conditional until I could step away. It wasn't until I moved overseas and now I wasn't surrounded by the Mormon bubble and the Mormon monoculture, because the Mormon church is very insular. It's very much about sticking with your own, right? So,
So
yeah,
did you
so
not have a the Mormon community, I assume overseas was not as big anyways, but you didn't have that I believe, okay, I'm looking for my notes, but I believe that it's like so you're assigned to your congregation
yes.
geographically, and so did you not have that once you moved overseas?
Um, yes and no. I mean, so we moved to Almaty, Kazakhstan, which is,
Wow.
I know. Nobody even knows where it is, let alone why would you move there? So there was actually a very small Mormon church. It was mostly run by
Okay.
missionaries, and had a very small congregation of Kazakhs. And so we went a few times, but it was like we couldn't talk to anyone. They all spoke Russian. None of
Yeah,
them
that's
spoke
hard.
English. The missionaries were there and they would translate for us. So we would go to church and we would put headphones on, and then the missionaries would translate what was happening. So, no, we didn't have that community anymore, to answer your question.
Yeah.
It's not at all like a Mormon ward. So that's what they call the congregation according to your
Okay.
geographic area. It's called a ward. And so,
Gotcha.
yes, like you are told you live here, therefore you are in this ward, you go to church at this time, this is your bishop, and like you can't deviate from that.
Okay.
And so what that does is, well, it removes choice,
Yeah.
but it also means that you're going to church with everybody that you live around. And so you kind of keep tabs on each other.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see you at church on Sunday. I'm going to stop by and knock on your door and ask where you were. Or, you have that physical proximity, which really keeps it insular. And, when you're really in the church, for those people who are fully in the church, they fully believe it, they're fully immersed in it. That's great, honestly,
Yeah.
because you have friends, you have a social structure, you have a community. But then when you're starting to question, it's suffocating.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I would say um, something that is a pro and con of the military lifestyle is that we do move churches, every couple of years. And it's nice because my husband and I really reevaluate our faith and beliefs every couple of years because we're trying to find a new church that aligns with what we believe the Bible says. And there are so many different interpretations, we'll say, of you know,
Yes.
of what the Bible says. And
Yes.
but for the first 25 years of my life, I went to one church with one people and I had all
Mm.
those friends and it was so nice to have all those friends. It's so hard to start over every couple of
Yeah.
years. And I
Yeah.
can say that I was blessed in that my home church growing up was an amazing church and they really taught I believe they really taught the truth of the Bible without any extras, if you will.
Mm. Yeah.
But I know, like, even it, like, if I had doubts or that kind of thing, it would have been really hard to step away from it because, like, those were my people. What am I going to do? Just like go and make new friends?
Yes.
Like, that's so
Yeah.
intimidating.
It's so intimidating. It's so
Yeah.
intimidating. But the the women I work with get to the point where they feel like they can't breathe if they stay. A lot of them are including myself. One of the things I went through when I was still in the church but questioning was severe anxiety and like panic attacks. I was having panic attacks almost every night, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Looking back in hindsight, it's because I was in a life that wasn't mine. I was in a life that I was told to live, and it didn't
Someone
align with
created
me.
it for you.
Yes. And my
Yeah.
body was screaming at me, and I didn't see it for what it was for a while, but that was kind of one of the first signs for me. Um, and then also going back to your previous thought about um, how Christian faith that Jesus gives you grace and takes on your sins. And in the Mormon faith, they believe that, but it's very conditional. They have this saying, what is it? Faith without works is dead, or grace without action is
Yep.
dead, something like that,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
If you do all of this, if you're a stay-at-home mom, if self-sacrifice, if you endure to the end. So it's there's always this caveat, and so it's very conditional. You go to heaven based on certain conditions. You receive love from Christ based on certain conditions. um, and one of the hardest things people learn and have to deal with when they leave is that unconditional love that was preached
Mm-hmm.
was
Is
actually
not.
conditional. Because
Yeah.
when you leave, it's like, oh, that was a condition that I didn't meet. So that
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love was actually conditional.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think I believe it's Paul that says that in the Bible, that faith without works is dead, but the way
Mm,
like if you read the whole passage of how he's talking about it, it's more of if your faith is not changing how you want to live your life, then it's not true faith, essentially, because for our instance, um, if Jesus really did this for me, if he went through torture and death and literally went to hell and came back again just to save me, who could have made any choice that I wanted to follow him or ignore him, that how could I not want other people to know about that? And also, how could I not want my life to reflect that love and that grace that he showed me?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's definitely a different, again, same words, different interpretation, right?
Yeah. I often say, for me, like, my relationship with God and my beliefs is totally personal. And it might be different from other, other people in the world, but it's very personal. And for me, one thing that was very freeing was I felt like the church, for me, the Mormon church, the church was the middleman. And the church was like interpreting God's message for me. And I just had to accept the interpretation that the church was giving me. And so
Yeah,
when I left the church and I was able to totally get rid of the middleman, my everything shifted for me. It was like,
for
wow,
sure.
I can have a direct line. I can
Yeah,
interpret these feelings for myself. I don't have to allow a religious organization to tell me what God is telling me my life plan is, right? I can do that myself.
for sure.
Yeah.
This is this is so interesting. I love like theology talks like this. I think it's so fun. So interesting. But let's start to wrap it up because I don't want to take away too much of your time. So, um, so can you tell us, like, I want to know more about like your curriculum and you so that our listeners
Sure.
can have that access if they'd like it. So can you tell us more about kind of the core pillars of your curriculum? How do you structurally move a woman from the chaos into like stable, confident lives? Without just giving us your whole spiel for free. How does that work?
Yeah, it's so I have a curriculum called Reclaimed, and it's a group and individual coaching programs. We have group calls, we do individual calls, but the curriculum is really it's it's really progressive in what we go through. We first start diving into identity and some of those beliefs, and learning how to identify some of those beliefs that are running in the background that are causing you to have some kind of an emotional reaction, right? Um, that's really integral before we can kind of start stepping into the parenting piece, because in order to really know, how you want to raise your kids, you need to be secure in yourself. You need to be
Yeah.
confident in yourself. And when you first leave a church, your identity is shattered and you don't know who you are, and you've lost a lot of confidence because that certainty in your life is gone. So we start working on the identity piece and unraveling and identifying some of those hidden beliefs. Yeah. So, and then we start looking at some of those behaviors like people pleasing and, always making sure everyone else is happy and losing yourself. So coming back into yourself and what is it that you want, and how can you slowly start to build what it is that you want in your life.
Okay.
And then we move into now, so we've kind of deconstructed some of these things. Now, what are some new beliefs? What are some better feeling emotions? How can you apply this to your children?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot there about emotional regulation too. Like if there's something that makes you feel triggered, how can we deal with that um so that we can kind of learn from it and move on and have a better feeling emotion, so we're not always triggered by someone in the church or a parenting situation or whatever it may be. Because when you're really confused on who you are and what you want, you're often emotionally overreactive because
Mm-hmm.
you just
For
don't know
sure.
what to feel in what situation. So we go through a really clear progression, and then we start talking about how do we do this with our kids? How can we build what's next for our kids? How can we come up with a family moral compass now based on everything that we learned? So that's kind of a quick overview of the Reclaimed program and how powerful it can be to rebuild who you are and your life coming up next. And, if you
Yeah.
have any listeners who are interested, there's a free masterclass on my website. So my website is
Awesome.
mamaudra.com. And if you click on the if you click on the masterclass, it's 5 shifts that every former Mormon mom needs to make. And if
Okay.
that really starts to resonate with you, then you can schedule a call with me and we can see if you're a good fit for the program. But it can be really transformational to help move women into a place of clarity and confidence and
Mm-hmm.
peace, so they're not stuck in that anger and resentment towards the church. And then that really bleeds into your relationship with your kids too. So we move you to a better feeling place so you can raise your kids in a way that feels really aligned with who you are.
I love that. Real healing instead of just kind of throwing band-aids on situations.
Yes, yes.
So where else? I know you're on Instagram. Are you anywhere else? And where can people find you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'm on most of the socials. If you look up Mama Audra, so that's the name of the business, Mama Audra. On Instagram, it's Mama Audra Official because someone already had that name. But
Rude.
I know. But on Facebook and TikTok, and then YouTube as well, you can just search Mama Audra, and I'm on there. And then my website, mamaudra.com as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So one thing we do here at Momtroversial is we have a Momtroversial moment at the end of every episode. It can be just, a moment that made you laugh, a moment that made you cry, a moment that made you think, I'm going to do that differently next time, or I'm going to do that the exact same way again. And it can be from at any point in your life. And so do you have a Momtroversial moment today?
I have lots of momtroversial moments. You kidding? My whole life is full of momtroversial moments. Um, I would say I think I'll go with more of like a pet peeve that I have that I'm learning
All
how
right.
to not be so emotionally triggered about. You know, uh, we we always had the rule with our kids that at the dinner table, no phones. Or, if we were having friends over for like a family dinner or some kind of family event, no phone, because you have a real person in front of your face. And so the phones
100%.
aren't even in the room.
Love
So
it.
we always had that rule, and so glad we did. But then when my kids became teenagers, their teenager friends didn't always have that rule. So it's like
Yeah.
they would come over, or even even worse was when my kids would bring home a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And so it's like, okay, my idea was that they're gonna want to try and impress me because
Yeah.
I'm their partner's mom, right? And they would sit on the couch and scroll on their phone.
Ugh,
And that
killer.
would drive me insane. Like, really? Really? Like, so your phone is more important than me? You're not even interested in talking to me? Like, how rude.
Like, why are you even here?
Why are you even here? Exactly. Your phone is more important than a conversation with me, obviously. So for me, that's kind of the biggest, I would say, difference in parenting approaches is when my kids would bring home a friend or, a partner, a love interest, and I would see the differences in how I raised my kids versus how they were raised. And it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to remove some judgment here and maybe think of, how can I engage this person and get them to put their phone away without being like, what are you doing? That's so rude.
That is so relatable. That is so relatable. Well, my momtroversial moment was one that like kind of made me stop and think the other day. Reagan, my oldest, who's been in and out of here. She's 4, and the other day she asked me if I wanted to play Magna-Tiles with her, and I said, "Sure, I'll play Magna-Tiles with you." She goes, "No, Mom, you don't have to play Magna-Tiles with me. Do you want to play Magna-Tiles with me?" And I was like, this is a learned behavior that she knows the difference between that. And I kind of don't like that. I think she might have learned it from like us, her parents, Um, because, she's 4 and generally I feel like 4-year-olds aren't thinking that stuff out right now.
Yeah.
And so I like I was, made a point to tell her, Reagan, I would like to play Magna-Tiles with you. I want to. And later I was talking to my husband and I was like, we need to like actively make sure that she knows that we want to play with her, not just that we're doing it out of obligation. And I think I hope some of it may have come from, she'll ask me to play and I'll say, Reagan, I have to make dinner right now. I'd like to play with you, but I have to make dinner, that kind of thing. I would like to think that's where it came from, but I also want to be self-aware enough to make sure that she knows that I love her and I want her to play with her. Or I want to play with her.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
can see that interpretation, but I also think how empowering that she knows the difference between
she
you
is so
have to
smart.
and you want to, right? Like at
Yeah,
4 years old, that's amazing that she
she is
can
so
see the
smart.
difference and she knows when something is a requirement, something has to be done, but she can also, I think, being able to separate what a want and a desire is, she can learn to say no when she doesn't want to do something. If it's something
Hmm.
that's a non-negotiable and she has that freedom, she doesn't have to just please someone else. I think
Yes,
that's
I do
actually a
love
pretty
that,
deep, a pretty
especially.
deep lesson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do love that, especially for. I mean, we're on girl number 3, so like, I'm all about that mindset of like, just
Yeah.
because someone tells you to do something or you think that someone
Yeah.
wants something from you does not mean you have to give it to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on here, and thank you everyone so much for listening. We love having these types of conversations, and we hope that you love it too. If you do, if you can give us a follow or rate us 5 stars, that would be awesome. I did just have Spotify very rudely tell me that we have 42 monthly listeners, and most podcasts of our type have 60. So that was a little rude, but okay, Spotify, tracking. But thank you so much, Audra, for coming on. It was a great conversation. And we will make sure to have all of her information in the show notes. And you'll see us. We'll tag you on Instagram when we post the little clips of the episode coming out in a couple of weeks. So thank you so, so much.
Great. Yeah, thanks for
Appreciate
having
ya.
me. It's been a really interesting conversation. I
Yeah,
enjoyed it. So thank you.
me too. Thanks so much. See you later, guys.